We are live. Matt coming back for yet another episode. First time on video, so we can say hello to the camera, which is kind of exciting. We're learning week by week how this is going.
Essentially.
Trying to make improvements from there. So we've had a good couple of weeks with no video and just kind of working through some of our talking points, finishing. The title of tonight's episode is going to be Improving the Voting System in the United States, broken down into kind of a two-part episode. First being congressional, followed by presidential. So tonight we're going to be talking about the congressional voting system and then kind of diving into presidential next week. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with kind of where we're going. Matt, I don't know if you want to kick this off with your first bullet point, but we can dive in from there.
Okay, so to start off with, I would say probably the biggest problem that I have when it comes to the voting system of the United States is basically the first past the post, or as you may know it, the winner-take-all system that we have in this country for congressional districts. And I really don't like the system. I don't really think it's really fair to all the smaller parties in this country. Because when you really think about it, I mean, this nation is about it's over 320 million people now, probably going on 330 in the next couple of years, potentially. Yeah. If not the next couple of decades. So,
right.
So with that in mind, I just don't feel like this country really has the true, like, I don't know, that's not the right word. I would say, like the best way to give, like, a multi-layered voice from the people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because when you have two political parties, like most first-past-the-post systems tend to really have, like in Canada and the UK, though their smaller parties do tend to have a much larger voice.
Yeah.
In their legislatures than we do. Mm-hmm. So those may not be the best examples, but it's still kind of true that when it comes to Great Britain, the Labour Party and the Conservative Party tend to be the dominant.
Yeah.
Whereas in Canada, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party tend to be the most dominant.
Right.
But for us, it's the Democrats and Republicans. But anyway, the thing that I would really like to have in this country when it comes to congressional representation, or at least the election of our congressional representatives in the House, is open party list proportional representation. So essentially what that means is the parties make the lists of the candidates to be elected, and then the seats will be distributed to each party in proportion to the number of votes that the party receives. Okay. So let's say here in Indiana, for example, the Republicans win 30 to 50% of the vote. Yeah. The Democrats win about 30 to 35% of the vote, and then the Libertarians win about 5% of the vote.
Right.
So, which is kind of what happened in 2016, actually. So essentially, what would happen is the Republicans would get 50% of the seats, the Democrats would get about 30% of the seats, and then the Libertarians would get 5% of the seats, which will roughly translate to 5, 3, and 1.
Okay.
Roughly.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying, just because I'm not as familiar with this, and I just want to get a better understanding is, you know, let's say right now, how many districts do we have in Indiana?
Right now we have about 9 congressional districts.
9 districts. Okay, so amongst the 9 districts, what you're saying is that that's essentially 9 seats to fill. Yes. In the House. And that instead of going district by district by district, where you could have somebody win a seat by a 51-49 margin, you're saying we're going to take that 49% that went one way, the 51% that went the other, add those totals to the total for each party that's represented in the election, and then based on that, no matter where they fall geographically, we are going to assign the representation for our 9 seats based on the total popular vote distributed out amongst participating parties.
Yeah, that's actually probably a good way to put it.
Okay.
Because going to the next bullet point I have here, voters have to choose which individual candidates from the list provided by each party, and then the individual candidates will be elected according to the popular vote. So essentially, the vote that they put down for the candidate that they like will not only count for both the candidate, but also the party in general. So,
Okay.
so if you want to go to the little pictures I have.
Yep. And we can get a screenshot, Matt,
yeah.
for the video. We can get a screenshot so that they can see it as we kind of talk about it.
Yeah, so essentially, you had, because from the 2016 example, I am not using this 2018 example because I actually did this graph for something else, another pet project of mine, a while ago, so that's kind of the data that I had at the time. But essentially, because if you look at the congressional districts here,
yeah.
essentially you just have each small district, which is represented by roughly 700,000 people.
Yep.
Roughly, it's probably like 711,000 now, but instead of having these little congressional districts,
yeah,
because like I've said, they, or at least how they're structured, they're essentially promoting just the two-party system, but there's also a bunch of other issues we may get involved later.
Yeah.
But essentially, instead of having all these districts, every single candidate is basically kind of up at an at-large district. The whole state acts as one large district.
Correct.
The amount of seats that they're assigned according to the census about every 10 years.
So let me, in practicality sense, as this system would play out, you would have a voter going to the polls on election day, and because we have 9 seats to fill, that voter would be voting for 9 different representatives?
No, they just pick one representative.
They simply pick one.
Okay. And essentially, the top vote getters from each party will get the seats based on not only their own individual performance, but also the performance of the party.
Correct. And so in reality, so that makes more sense, and I understand that now. I'm glad I asked that question. So basically, I'm picking, my one representative for the House, and that vote essentially counts towards 2 things. It counts for that person, but it also counts for whatever party I chose. So there's a party tally and an individual tally. The party gets divvied out based on popular vote percentage.
That's the whole state.
That's the 5-3-1 that we see in this diagram. And then the top vote getters, doesn't matter where they are geographically, those are the ones that end up getting the seats proportionate to the breakdown by party.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's the way it works.
That makes a lot of sense.
And I kind of designed it that way because a lot of open list party systems tend to do it by the national vote. Like for most states, you have to get, well, for most countries really that implement the system, you have to get around at least 5 to 7% of the national vote in order to get the seats in the legislature. And I kind of did that, but instead of doing it for the whole nation, I did it based on each individual state. Okay.
So let me ask you this, man, and I'll let you get back to the to our bullet points here because I don't want to get too far off topic. But just for our general audience, these are questions that are coming up for me. Is this system really allowing us, as I'm interpreting as we talk about it, what I see is it's giving the option to the voter to feel like they potentially can have a more true representation versus somebody feeling like, for example, I talked to many people who voted, 2 weeks ago, who said, well, I can't get behind what anybody's doing in this particular party, so they were going to vote straight ticket on one side, just to give all their votes to that party because they felt like it was either Democrat, Republican, right or left, nothing else. To me, this seems like where we probably don't have a whole lot of independents or libertarians or other representatives
or other third parties
really getting a realistic shot. This gives them that based on popular vote dispersed throughout, not necessarily by district.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that was kind of the whole goal of the system.
Which makes sense because how many people do you talk to that are like, I don't like either party?
And there's plenty.
It's all the time.
It's like, the moderates are essentially just being screwed over by this whole increasing political polarization that we have in this country.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it really kind of takes away their voice.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think we have to start getting to something that's a little bit more moderate. It's very obvious to me that, because of the political polarization, it's becoming increasingly hard for the elected representatives to actually do their jobs. Things they're not getting done at the rate that they necessarily could be.
Yeah. Because the willingness to compromise is just, if you know what I mean.
I mean, really, up until now, after 2 years into Trump's presidency, this recent bipartisan prison reform bill is really the first thing that we've seen that's been a true bipartisan effort.
Well, I think there's actually been more, but this might be the really first significant one.
I was going to say, to this magnitude, to where it
garners...
garners...
Because you have to keep in mind, the Democrats were trying to compromise on the whole immigration thing, but that kind of broke down, unfortunately.
So we can get back to the bullet points. Good stuff, though. So
for me, the next bullet point that I'm going to bring up that I think is kind of important is, when it comes to states that don't have as many seats, there probably would be a tendency for the larger parties to really kind of dominate all the seats. So for me, with states that have only about 6 elected seats or less, the top number of parties that win at least 5% of the state's vote must be given at least 1 seat in the legislature. So that way, the larger parties don't necessarily tend to...
So should a libertarian or an independent or somebody else garner at least 5% of the vote, then they would be rewarded a seat.
Yeah.
I get that. Now, I'm just curious, again, 5%, what was the logic? Was there any precedent behind that number, or was this, you're just saying, there's got to be something, so we're going to set it at 5?
Well, technically, there actually is precedent for the 5 percentile, because when you go back to the Weimar Republic back in the 1930s, one of the reasons why the Nazis kind of came to power, not just despite their propaganda, which was really effective, but that's a different topic for a different day. Essentially, the Weimar Republic's legislature didn't really have any threshold requirements. So if you got 1% of the vote, you got 1% of the seats.
Yep.
So that really kind of allows so many parties to get into the legislature, which really kind of breaks down the system even more.
Yeah.
Which intentionally made the Weimar Republic, which was already a weak government to begin with, even weaker.
Okay.
So that's why there's typically that 5% threshold.
Right.
Which is what you see, at least partially, with regards to Germany's lower house, the Bundestag, where essentially they have a different system, which is mixed proportional representation, where it combines congressional districts like what we have, and proportional representation, which is what I'm proposing here.
Right.
Essentially. But that, again, may be a different topic for
I was going to say, that sounds like we could go pretty deep into that if you wanted to.
Yeah. So, for me, the next bullet point that I really kind of want to hit is automatic voter registration. That, for me, is crucial.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know why we don't do it in this country, but I think all citizens, once they turn 18, should be automatically registered to vote for both congressional and presidential elections. Jeez, that was kind of hard to get out.
That's all right.
And essentially, I can see this being done in academic institutions like high schools and colleges, because that's how I actually registered to vote for the first time.
Yep.
And it was actually kind of a unique exercise that my teacher brought up, because I don't think there was actually an election going on at that time.
Okay.
But
you guys she was encouraging you to get registered.
Yeah, and it was for extra credit.
Okay.
So that was really nice.
Yeah.
But as part of this, you should have some form of identification in order to vote. I think that's a fair compromise that I would say most sensible people can agree on.
Yep.
And examples that I have listed down here could be like a special voting ID card, a passport, your driver's license, a bank statement, paycheck, military ID, birth certificate, Medicare or Medicaid card.
What's great about this, and we can share this list with our audience, is that people talk about the challenges of getting an ID card. It's not that hard.
It really isn't.
Take a piece of mail, get a credit card, get something.
Yeah.
If I want to go watch a football game at a 21 and over bar, I got to produce some sort of identification.
Yeah.
It's asinine to me that wouldn't be required to vote.
Absolutely.
We're talking about, as a citizen, probably our greatest responsibility to this country. And bars can require it, but we don't require anything here.
Well, that's not necessarily true. I mean, it does depend on each individual state.
Right, I get that. But
and
there are
certain IDs may not work in different states, just depending on where you live and all that good stuff.
I'm just saying, in the general
sense.
sense.
In the general sense, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That I have always kind of disagreed with Democrats on, because, like, I mean, seriously, you have to have an ID in order to get a dang firearm or a car or anything important.
I think it's pretty obvious why people don't push it as hard as they do, because it allows for holes in the system. And
I mean, that's kind of true, but at the end of the day, there's another issue that I think we should talk about when it comes to improving the voting system that we could probably talk about after the whole presidential episode.
Okay.
And that issue, I will just leave it out there, is gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
A lot of
That's also another reason why I want to get rid of the winner-take-all system with congressional districts that we have, because it really kind of just kicks that to the freaking curb.
Yeah.
Just by design.
Okay. Well, I know we've kind of already talked about the districts.
Yeah. So for me, I would probably say the last bullet point that we're probably going to cover here is election day.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of makes sense why the founding fathers would do it the way that they did, because the first Tuesday of November probably seems like a fair time for a mostly agricultural society to vote, because it's kind of like when farming season's really kind of come to its end. And with transportation not being as fast as it is, I mean, it probably didn't really make much of a difference when they set the vote. But in this day and age, come on, a Tuesday? I mean, that's just, I mean, to me, it's just, I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I would say it's most likely just, it's not redundant, it's just inefficient.
Yeah.
So, I would say, it's going to be really hard to change it, because it's in the Constitution, unfortunately, and getting a constitutional amendment is even harder than passing a law. So, I would say, make Election Day a national holiday where people can get the day off in order to vote.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to make a system where if you don't vote, it's your own stupid fault. I mean, it's your own fault.
Right.
I mean, there's no excuse. There's no excuse not to vote. And I think that's also part of the problem why a lot of people just don't vote, because
can't get off work, can't get there in time. I mean, polls here in Indiana were 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. You get in a long line.
Yeah.
I talked to multiple people who had to go back later in the day because the line was so long.
Yeah.
And people, a lot of people, myself included, of course you're working during the day, but you're also paying attention to what's going on. It's a pivotal time in our country, and I think it makes sense to do that. I think that's a smart, it's one day.
Because India does it. I mean, and various other countries, in addition to India, also do it. So why can't we do it?
Right.
Like, our voting system is so archaic when it comes to other countries that I think for me, it's time to say, you know what? Let's move forward.
Right.
It's time for change. We need to embrace it.
Sound like Obama.
That may be true. But truth be told,
I know.
America does have a lot of issues that it needs to fix.
I agree, Matt. I was being sarcastic.
Yeah, I get that.
No, and I think that's a point well received. I think our audience would probably, hey, who doesn't want an extra day off work?
Seriously.
I think it's good. So, anyways, that kind of brings our discussion on the congressional portion of our voting reform, if you will. Just kind of discussion, not proposition, but discussion. And so we will kind of pick up where we left off. This week, next week, discussing the presidential portion of this. And like I said, we're going to put some of these graphics up on the video. We'll probably, what I'll probably do is we'll have the video cut here today, try and get this all put together, and then release maybe both the congressional and presidential videos together, so they can see both episodes. So that brings it to a close.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.